All right, good morning, everyone. Hey, Commissioner. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the zoning hearing for Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023. The time is 9:31 a.m. Let's begin this morning with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right, at this time, I'd like to ask our staff to introduce the first zoning case.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Adam Mendez, and I'm a senior planner with the zoning section. There are 6 zoning cases before you on today's agenda, the first of which is DCI 2022-00024 in reference to Gator Recreation. The subject property is approximately 7.1 acres and is generally located south of the Hammond Stadium Sports Complex at the intersection of Plantation Road and 6 Mile Cypress Parkway. The property is located in the intensive development future land use category and is also located in the mixed use overlay per Lee Plan Map 1C. The request is to rezone the subject property from commercial plan development to mixed use plan development to permit the following maximum thresholds: 90,000 square feet commercial office retail, 70,000 square feet of commercial recreation, 250 hotel units, and 210 multifamily units, which include 111 bonus density units. The hearing examiner's recommendation is approval, subject to conditions, and there were no participants of record. Staff and the applicant are available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for our staff at this time?
No.
Okay, I see no questions. At this time, would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Good morning, Al Quattrone with Quattrone & Associates. I don't have a presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for the applicant at this time?
Al, thank you for
Pendergrass?
working on this case. I know this has been long through the process for years. I know they've been talking about different activities here, and sports events, hotels, whatever. But again, thank you again for your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move the item.
All right, we have a motion for approval from Commissioner Pendergrass. Do we have a second? Seconds from Commissioner Sandelli. Any further questions for the applicant? I see none. There are no participants of record. At this time, is there any further discussion? I see no further discussion. Are there any objections to the motion for approval? I see no objections. That motion carries unanimously. Please introduce the next case, Sutherland Nissan and Genesis CPD Amendment.
Good morning, Commissioner Sharon Badamchian from Lee County Zoning. This is an amendment. The zoning is already in place. They are amending Sutherland Nissan CPD to increase the size of the building from 58,000 to 90,000 and to add the Genesis dealership to the site. And hearing examiner reviewed and recommended approval. There were no participants of record.
Okay, very good. Any questions for our administrative staff at this time? Okay, I see no questions. Thank you very much. Is the applicant here, and would they like to make a presentation?
Good morning, Fred Drovlik, planner for RBI Planning, for the agent for the applicant. No presentation this morning, just here for questions. We agree with the HECS and recommendation and with the staff report.
Very good. Any questions for the applicant, commissioners?
I move approval.
Okay. Commissioner Pendergrass moves approval. Do we have a second?
I'll second, but I do have one question.
Okay, so the motion is from Commissioner Pendergrass, seconds from Commissioner Sandelli, and you're recognized for your question.
Thank you. Is this an additional building or an expansion of the existing building? Just out of curiosity.
Well, it's kind of a mix. So there's an existing building that they're going to expand, which is the Nissan dealership, and then there'll be a knockdown of the old Genesis, of the old building that's now for the Genesis.
I'm familiar with the site.
Yep, and then so a new building on the Genesis site.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Any further questions? No? All right, thank you. And so we have a motion and a second for approval. Do we have any further discussion by the commission? Okay, I see no further discussion. Are there any objections? No objections, then that motion carries unanimously. All right, let's move to the San Carlos Hotel CPD.
Commissioners, good morning. Dirk Danley, Principal Planner with the Zoning Section, Lee County Community Development. The third case before you today is DCI 2022-60. San Carlos Hotel CPD has a request to rezone approximately 1.5 acres from commercial and 2-family conservation districts to commercial plan development to allow for a 66-room hotel. The hearing examiner did recommend approval with conditions, and there were 6 participants of record. Staff and the applicant are here with any questions that you have.
Okay, very good. Do we have any questions for our staff at this time? All right, I see no questions. Would the applicant make a presentation, please?
Again, Al Quattrone with Quattrone and Associates. I don't have a presentation, but happy to answer questions.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Quattrone? Okay, I see no questions. At this time, we'll move to the participants of record then. Thank you, Mr. Quattrone. And we'll bring you up if anything comes up that we need to ask questions about afterwards. So let's call Gail Bell. Gail, are you here? Let's call Nello Cernoa. Nello? How about Rosemary Davidson? Rosemary Davidson? How about Linda McCarron? Linda McCarron, are you here? Great. So Linda, when you make your way up here, you're going to notice a few things. First, you don't need to touch the microphone. It's all set. And at the very top of the podium, you're going to see like something that looks like a stoplight. It's got a green, yellow, and red light. You'll have 5 minutes to share your comments. When the yellow light comes on, that's when you want to start wrapping up, because when the red light comes on, I'll call the next speaker's name. Okay.
Okay.
Good morning. Go ahead.
So I am the one that we have 2 places right next to the property that is in the corner. It's South Street and San Carlos Drive or Court. And that's the property that I'm concerned about. They want to rezone that. And we're residential. I mean, we are multi-family, but we are residential there. And we've lived there for over 50 years. And I cannot, I agree with progress, but the height of the building is bothering me. We went and we looked at Margaritaville, and that is only it's considered 4 floors to us, the common person, because the downstairs is all open. And that's how this one's going to be built. Going to have parking on the bottom, and then 3 floors of units, and then the 4th floor is going to be their play area with the recreation area. I prefer, and many do, to cut that back down to 2, which was originally planned. 2 floors of motels. And it's a lot crammed into that little area. And I don't know if they want to build or if they're going to sell this as a building spot, because I already saw it for sale, but it's off the market again. And it already did say it was approved. And that's when I started calling. This was before the first meeting that I saw that.
Okay.
So that's how I got involved. But yeah, the traffic there, coming down San Carlos Court, coming across, when we deal with the Moose. The Moose is traffic enough on South Street. But that's my concern. I hate to see a building that high that we're looking at. And I don't think I'd really like the patios looking over at us. That's my concern.
Good deal. Thank you for your comments this morning.
Okay.
Thank you very much. All right, at this time, we'll call Elaine Oben. Elaine Oben, are you here? How about Tanya Schott? Tana, T-A-U-N-A, Tana Schott? Okay, that concludes the participants of record. So we'll go back to the applicant. Applicant, would you like to respond to anything that was said during the public comment portion?
Again, if you have any questions, we did work with staff and our client, obviously, to work on a design that would be compatible with the site. We do have some increased setbacks, and we do have a little bit more green space on the west side next to the neighbor's property to help soften the look of the building. Again, the 4th story would be the pool, but it does have walls around the side to provide privacy to them and hopefully for the neighbors. So we think it'll be definitely an asset to the community over there when worked with staff to get through to here.
Very good. Commissioners, any questions for our applicant at this time? Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Quattrone. All right, Commissioners, it's back to the board for consideration at this time.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion for approval from Commissioner Greenwell,
Second?
Second from Commissioner Pendergrass. Do we have any discussion?
My only point is,
Commissioner Sandelli? Yep.
is that I think there's an increased opportunity to get people off the island because we can only have so much space on the island itself. So I think this helps in a number of different ways. We're always going to have the issue of density and height based on the area it sits in. But I think anything that we can do off island is going to help the overall picture of that area down there. So.
Any further comments or discussion then? Okay. Are there any objections to the motion that's on the floor?
No.
I see no objections. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Please introduce the next case, which would be 31 Oaks RPD.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Beth Workman. I'm with the zoning section. The next case before you is 31 Oaks RPD, DCI 2021-00051. The request is to rezone approximately 88.3 acres from residential plan development and agricultural to residential plan development to allow a maximum of 265 single-family units or 342 townhouse units or any combination of those units. The property is located south of the Caloosahatchee and the Drawbridge along State Road 31, east of State Road 31, and north of Palm Beach Boulevard. It is in the suburban future land use category. The mixed-use overlay is located just to the south and not on the subject property. And as I mentioned, the zoning districts are residential plan development as well as agricultural. So the RPD portion that you see on the map was rezoned in '06 to allow 140 single-family units. And what the applicant is doing with this submittal is adding 49.62 acres that are in the AG2 agricultural zone to the RPD and redesign to this master concept plan. The hearing examiner recommended approval, subject to conditions with deviations, and there were 6 participants of record.
Very good. Do you have any questions for our staff at this time, Commissioners? Any questions at all? Commissioner Greenwell, you have a question?
I do have a question. Thanks, Chairman. Is that corridor right there on that side of the river, did the county make that suburban, or is that still Ag 2 there? That's still Ag 2?
Still Ag 2.
Okay. That was my question.
It's zoned Ag 2. It's in the suburban future land use category.
Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, good deal. Any further questions for our team? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to call the applicant to make their presentation. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Steve Hartzell with Pavis Law Firm. Mr. Neal had planned to be here today, but was unexpectedly delayed. However, our team is here. We're prepared with a presentation, but we could also hold that off until you've heard from the public, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, very good. Commissioners, it's at your pleasure. Are you okay with any questions for Mr. Hartzell at this time? Ready to move to the public participants then? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hartzell. At this time, I'd like to call the public participants of record. We'll start with Bob DeBrock. Bob DeBrock, are you here? No comment today? Okay, thank you. We have Fred Fredrickson. Fred Fredrickson. Would you like to speak today? No, thanks? Okay. How about Rose Garcia? Would you like to speak? Rose Garcia? How about Angelique Otley? Sure, I'll come back to you. How about Terry Short? Are you here? Terry Short? And James Simpson. James Simpson? All right, Miss Otley, you're on deck. I guess you're up to bat. I got to get my terms appropriate.
That's the baseball guy.
Yeah.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Angelique Otley. Let me put a face again to the voice.
There you go.
I have lived in the shores on Davis Boulevard from 1995, and the reason why most people out there buy the houses there is because, you know, the landscape, especially behind me, because that's exactly, you know, behind the property. And In 2005 to 2007, about 10-plus developments asked for approval for rezoning, what have you. And right after that, and that was a little bit less than 4,000 total houses. The market crashed, and not a lot of developments were made, except for maybe River Hall and a couple of the other ones. Well, Marino del Lago was one of them. They didn't do anything after they got their approval for the 140. In 2009, they asked for an extension. They got one from 2011 to 13 to go ahead and build. They never did. Now, hold on, I'm kind of nervous now. And in addition to that, since then, 2017 to now, there's been additions to already approved areas for almost 1,800 additional housings from River Hall, Portico, and additional ones that we're going to build but now have reapplied and got approval for zoning. The last traffic report was in there was from 2005. I was looking for something more current, and there wasn't. I did my own little traffic report, if you will, and like I said on Davis. In 25 minutes, from 6:50 to about 7:15, 25 minutes, coming up coming up 5th Street to turn south on Davis Boulevard to bypass all that traffic, 150 cars come up there. That's what Palm Beach is for, not the back roads, if you will. And then for 45 minutes, 250 cars. I actually submitted that information also. And the light at Davis and Palm Beach, to come out of Davis, you have 12 to 24 minutes to come out. 12 to 24 seconds, depending. But then it's a 2-minute traffic on Palm Beach. And sometimes it got backed up 3 separate times where the light was green, but there was so much traffic, the Palm Beach traffic couldn't continue. Otherwise, they would block off the traffic coming out of Davis. Also, there was a comment made at the hearing examiner, I don't know if it was intended to me, that they don't make up numbers. Well, I have the count and everything that I did, and I could also provide the ring video of me sitting outside in my front yard to do that. I wanted to submit it, and the county attorney said since it wasn't submitted to the hearing examiner, I couldn't submit it now. But that was information that I didn't know that I had to prove it at the time, or else I would have. But anyway, also, let me see. With all these developments now, they have the drainage that they're doing now in the area. I want to know, is it incorporating all the new developments, or is just what's there now? Because a couple of rains that they've had previously, it's filling up these ditches, more so than it used to. Also, they want big city development in a small city. They want to bring that Miami, Hillsborough, all those counties here because the people are coming here because it's cheaper to live here, but the people that live here now can't afford to stay, and that's a shame. But if they continue with all this development, it is going to put a strain on the infrastructure when it comes to education and social services. Education, social services, responders, healthcare, and law enforcement. They're going to be stretched to their limits until you pause all of this for a minute. Allow those that have approval to build, go ahead and build it and see how it fares, instead of just having everything at one time and, okay, well, we'll figure it out once it's done. That's not a smart way to do things. I have an example, for instance. You have a school teacher and you give them 5 new students a day. How long do you think before the teacher goes to the school board and says, you guys can go ahead and chew chalk and suck Sharpies, because you're forcing them to do something and they're trying their best, but it's not working with what they're given. You're forcing all of this development and not letting the county catch up to adapting to everything that's there. Also, let me see. The notice. There was a notice for the original hearing examiner. And what else? Hold on 1 second. There was a local developer meeting at Crossroads Church, I believe it was November. About 45 plus people came. And when the hearing examiner notice was, 9 of us showed up. 6 of us spoke, as you see. That 6 of us doesn't represent the area of people. Most people didn't know because the notice area was, sorry.
Ms. Otley, yeah, your time has expired. I appreciate your comments today, and we thank you very much for coming in.
Didn't know it was timed.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, and so there's the stoplight right on the top there. Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ms. Otley. Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we've called all the participants of record. I'd like to go ahead and ask the applicant to come and respond to the comments that were made.
Yes, sir. Steve Hartzell again for the record. I think a couple of the comments were addressed to the landscaping in the rear of the existing yards on Davis and Demoya. The project has addressed that by providing for a wall, and a opaque wall or fence, along with a landscape buffer. So along any of the residential areas, there will be significant buffers for both the single family and the townhouse. With regard to the development itself and the impact, there's an approved development there, the existing RPD, the Marina del Lago RPD, which has access on the north side to Demoya. Neal Communities recognized the neighbors did not want this project to have an impact on their neighborhood. Consequently, Neal Communities does not show an access on Demoya. So this project won't have an impact on Demoya or on Davis, on the roads there. They specifically closed that off so that there's now two access points, one on State Road 31 and one to the south on Storage Bay Drive. So they have addressed the concerns of the neighbors. They heard that. They addressed those concerns specifically. So, you know, with regard to the traffic, obviously this project will have to pay impact fees, which is going to help to provide funds to improve the roads that are there. This project does not cause any deficiencies. The hearing examiner acknowledged that it build out the level of service for these roads will be adequate. I think the project has sufficiently identified responses to the questions that the neighbors had. I'd be happy to answer any questions. We're satisfied with the conditions that the hearing examiner has recommended. We'd urge you to approve it.
Good deal. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Hartzell at this time then? Commissioner Pendergrass?
Address the water management issues. I mean, the water drainage is going to be used for the existing pond there on the southern portion, or the other, I'm sure the whole area will be managed as far as water, surfacing water going to the east towards that community?
No, this project won't have an impact on the drainage to the east. The project engineer, and he's here and can address this specifically, but the project is designed to accommodate the historic flows that will go into essentially a drainage area along the east side, which will run from the south to the north, basically take those historic flows where they've been going. This project itself, of course, as you know, is required to maintain all of its existing drainage on site, and that's the way the water management is going to be designed.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions, commissioners? No? All right, Mr. Hartzell, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're back to the board then to consider the item. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion for approval from Commissioner
I'd also
Greenwell.
like to have a comment as well.
Okay, and then the second, so the motion is from Commissioner Greenwell and the second's from Commissioner Pendergrass. And Commissioner Greenwell, you're recognized for your comment.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to address some of the issues out there. Obviously, I live right there, and I understand the issues, and I know exactly what you're talking about, where everybody that's coming from LaBelle area or Joel or out that way cuts through the neighborhood and cuts through Davis and to try to get through traffic. There's no question that needs to be addressed. Unfortunately, those are state roads, both of them, you know, 31 and State Road 80. We are at least fortunate they are addressing the issue. They should be addressing it now instead of a little bit later, but it is coming. So we're at least fortunate in that way in that area that they are going to fix that intersection, which will stop the traffic from stopping at 31, which will directly go through without a stoplight there, and if that design gets built. So we are definitely feeling growth pains out there, obviously, but they are state roads, and it's in the process, and I witness it every day watching them on all the properties out there surveying, and it's just a matter of when's they're going to get funded and when they're going to build it, but I do believe it's coming in the next few years. So I just wanted to make sure we all knew that, because it is coming, and there are a lot of people that doesn't realize that corridor is being addressed. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Greenwell. Any further comments, commissioners? Okay, I see no further comments then. Are there any objections to the motion on the floor? Okay, I see no objections. That motion carries unanimously. All right, let's move to the homes at 81 West RPD remand hearing.
Morning, Commissioners. For the record, Anthony Rodriguez, Zoning Section Manager with the Department of Community Development. Our next case this morning is the Homes at 81 West Residential Plan Development, DCI 2021-00026. This is a remand hearing that was remanded to the hearing examiner to consider a relocation of access from Penzance Boulevard to Blasingame Road. The request is to rezone 10 acres approximately from agricultural to residential plan development to allow for a maximum of 90 single-family detached and attached rental homes. As I noted, back in March of 2023, the board remanded this to the hearing examiner to consider relocating the access from Blasingame Road to Penzance Boulevard. The remand hearing was carried out back in May or June, and that access has been relocated and the requisite deviation has been requested and is recommended for approval with conditions by the hearing examiner. The hearing examiner is recommending approval of the request subject to conditions and deviations as set forth in your packet this morning, and there were 10 participants of record on this case. Staff and the applicant are here for any questions.
Very good. Commissioners, any questions at this time? You know, I guess, and maybe it'll seem redundant, but so this was a case we've heard before. We remanded it back because I think many of us had concerns about the access. That was the specific focus of the remand. So now that the hearing examiner has looked at the access, y'all have made a change to that to have the main access now out onto Penzance, which was, I think, something that responded to a lot of the comment that we had at the first hearing. So really today's case, if I could maybe even just ask our county attorney at this time, today's hearing is really about the remand hearing and the access, and do we agree with the way things have come out after the second hearing examiner remand hearing?
The case before you is a full review of the case because there was no decision made at the previous case, the hearing date. However, the recommendation is provided by the hearing examiner is based on the access issue that you've just discussed. We had 2 members of the public that spoke at the previous hearing, and then we had some that spoke at the remand hearing specifically on the access issue. So the full decision is before you, but the remand was specific to the access point.
Okay, and so I guess just to clarify though, that was where I wanted to clarify was, so there are 2 participants that have been able to present evidence all the way through the process. And I'm gonna call those 2 participants first because according to the rules of this process, they're allowed to speak on the full case. And then there are some participants that participated at just the remand hearing, and you're telling me the rules of the process that were, though, that they can only address the testimony they shared at the remand hearing, correct?
That is correct. The participants are limited to the testimony that they were presenting during the HEX hearing. There's only 2 that were there for the entire process, and the rest were specific to the access point issue.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, thank you. Any questions for our staff at this time then? Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to call the applicant to make their presentation.
Good morning, Neil Montgomery for the record. I was going to clarify the history, but you've already done that, and I appreciate that. The question that was raised at the first hearing was in regards to the access and drainage. The record reflects that an ERP has already been issued. It's always been fully reviewed by South Florida. And at the remand hearing, some folks didn't like condition 4, which was a condition recommended by staff. And the condition says we can have the emergency access on Blasingame, but if and when Crystal to the south connects all the way from 6 Mile to Plantation, then the staff wants it to become a full access, so there's an actual road network out there which will actually help alleviate some of the concerns the residents raised on Penzance, but Penzance does have an acceptable level of service. We do have a PowerPoint and the team's here, but we'll save that for questions if you have any, if that's okay.
Yeah. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant or any request to see the PowerPoint presentation? No?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, I'll call the two participants who have been with us the whole time who can speak on any issue, and then I'll go ahead and begin calling the ones who appeared at the remand hearing. The first was Samantha DuPont. She's not unable to make it today? Okay, thank you. How about David Richards? Good morning. Good morning. And we'll go ahead and work on the timer. There you go.
So even though I have the ability to talk about the whole project, I really just want to discuss the road.
Okay.
So as you know, Blasingame Road is a private road, and this, what we're here about is to change the entrance and get it off of Blasingame and put it on Penzance. But in doing so, at the end of this, the examiner recommended that the road, as soon as Crystal Extension connected with Blasingame, that now that so-called stabilized emergency exit now becomes a full-fledged entry and exit. I don't see any provisions for any of that. There's no place for any stacking. There's nothing that would indicate that just one day magically it's going to be a road that people can go in and out of. I don't see any specifications on any of the gates, or if there's going to be gates, or if there's going to be telephone access, or if there's going to be stacking there for vehicles. I mean, it looks to me like the entryway is right at the fence line, and I don't think that makes a entryway in the sense of an entry. I own to the center of the road directly across from that, so I'm obviously going to object to that because I don't think that's a fair burden on me. And the road is, it's a private road. It's single lane 90% of the way. So even when Crystal connects, I don't see any way that Crystal's going to connect and all of a sudden this is going to be a viable highway or a viable county road. It just isn't. It's a private road, and it's not up to the county standards to even have this, have that be a consideration for the entry, which is the reason that you guys initially kicked it back to the hearing examiner saying that it doesn't meet the criteria. So all the other communities that have put in that connect with Blasingame Road all have stabilized, non-paved emergency entrances. And we would ask that this be the same. So that's about it.
Thank you for your comments this morning. Okay. At this time, I'll call the rest of the names who participated, people who participated at the remand hearing. The first one is Alex Alexandro. Alex, are you here? Okay. How about Richard Beach? Okay, Richard Beach. Victor DuPont, would you like to speak?
Good morning, gentlemen. My concern has been, as it always has been, the number of units per acre that's diminishing the value of the other properties.
Yeah, Mr. DuPont, remember we talked about that, so you're in the group that can only speak to the remand part of it, so that's just really on the access. So you'll, per the process, this is kind of like one of those, have you ever seen the courtroom dramas where, like, there's evidence presented to the jury, but that evidence wasn't allowed at court?
All I can talk about is access.
Yeah.
I've got nothing else to say.
Okay, all right, thanks, Mr. DuPont. How about Thomas Everhart, or Everett? No? Okay, how about Suzanne Fansler? All right, how about Steve Franta? How about Victor Gully? And how about Mark Holzman? Okay. All right, back to the board. Actually, I guess I'd like to provide the applicant an opportunity to rebut or respond to any of the comments.
Yeah, I'm going to briefly respond. The applicant just proposed the emergency access. The condition 4 that Mr. Richard referenced was the recommendation of LEDOT. Under your code, we would have to amend the DO to make that a permanent access. We'll have to meet the county requirements. County requirements require you to bring roads up to county standards at that time. And the stacking and all those issues you raised are valid concerns also are part of the development order process, so his concerns will be addressed at that stage.
Can I ask a question? Is the applicant okay with just leaving it an emergency access point then, instead of the transition to the full access?
Yes, but I don't want to get in trouble with your staff because they really think that we shouldn't force all that traffic out onto Penzance, and it ought to be able to go down to Crystal, which is going to connect all the way to 41 when it goes through. So that was a staff concern. So yes, as long as you don't get us in trouble with staff.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Any other comments for the applicant before she sits down? No, looks good. Okay. All right, back to the board for consideration then. Does somebody have a comment, or would they like to make a motion?
I have a question about, maybe staff could help me.
Commissioner Pendergrass, you're recognized.
So the primary interest now, Anthony, is on Penzance, correct? And based on the HEC's recommendation, it'd be emergency only on Blassinger, right?
That is correct, until such point that Crystal Drive is punched through to Plantation so that there's a connection from 6 Mile to Plantation. That access would remain emergency only.
And once that's done, though, then they were saying that could be a secondary entrance on Blassinger?
The access, the emergency access would need to be converted to a full access based on the condition that's being recommended by staff. And that was recommended in cooperation with Lee County DOT. And the rationale behind that, if I could kind of summarize the issue for all of you, is the more choices in terms of routes you provide from point A to point B, the more evenly distributed traffic becomes. And so when we provide multiple options, it alleviates some of the volume concerns on a specific roadway, which in this case would be Penzance Boulevard.
But I don't have the CIP in front of me here, but I think, remember last time I've seen that, Crystal was still 20 or 30 years out.
I believe it's 10 to 15. I think 2035 is the planning horizon for that particular project, and it's referenced in the HEC's recommendation. I can get a certain date for you. 2035? 2035.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, or does somebody wish to make a motion at this time?
Well, based upon that, we're in the position, obviously, I don't agree with totally the project. We're in a position with the HEC's recommendation, we have to accept it unless there's competent substantial evidence to vote against it. So I'm going to make a motion to approve based upon the remand's new language.
Good deal. And would you like to do anything with that condition about the making it a full access later, or you want to just approve it as presented by the HEC's?
Let me clarify that with Anthony. So as it is now, it's going to be temporary, but when Crystal's done, it'd be open up, or we could leave it. So I guess I could make a motion to approve based upon leaving the second entrance as emergency only in the future.
Is that your motion?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a motion from Commissioner Pendergrass. Do we have a second for that motion? Second from Commissioner Sandelli. Okay. Any further discussion on that? Okay, Commissioner Pendergrass, I appreciate your motion. I think that's a great way to handle this. I understand the logic of the staff and their presentation and why they conditioned it that way. However, I think it's, in this case, based on what I've seen, appropriate to leave it an emergency access point, and I agree with that. So, all right, if there's no further discussion, then I'll go ahead and call for the vote. Are there any objections? I see no objections. That motion is approved and passes unanimously. All right, we'll move to our final case. Please introduce the Bayshore Pines case.
Well, good morning. Sharon Bedamchian from Lee County Zoning. The request is rezone 9.13 acres from commercial C1 and agricultural to planned development to allow for 180 units of residential multifamily unit, 89 of which will be multifamily. The requested height is 52 feet, which is higher than its surroundings. The height allowed in the area is 35. However, our code allows higher building height provided they increase the setbacks. It's says for every foot of building height over 35, they have to increase half a foot setback on all around the site, which in this case, the applicant is providing a 60-foot setbacks all around, which is way more than what the code would require. Hearing examiner recommended approval. Staff recommended approval. Hearing examiner recommended approval subject to conditions and stipulations and deviations. There were 26 participants of record. Most of the issues discussed were traffic and environmental concerns.
Okay, do we have questions for our staff at this time? Thank you.
I do have.
Oh, actually,
Chairman,
Commissioner
if I may.
Greenwell, you're recognized.
Yeah. So originally, the applicant was asking for 60-foot heights, and they reduced it down to 52 at the hearing?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this time, would the applicant like to make their presentation?
The applicant actually has a very long, I'm sorry, Neil Montgomery for the record, a long PowerPoint. I think in the interest of time, we'll save that. The consultant team's here. I do just want to talk about briefly some of the issues. One is gopher tortoises. There are gopher tortoises on the site. They'll have to be addressed in accordance with the state's requirements. And we have the environmental consultant here, but that addressed at several levels. One concern that we heard, and you'll hear probably, is FDOT has plans to change Bayshore in this location. They don't like how that's being changed because it has an impact on them. We understand that impact. The applicant's not responsible for that. In my mind, it'll look a lot like what they're doing on 41, where they're getting rid of the suicide lane and putting in turn lanes. That's what I understand. And when that happens, it'll change their access. But we can address that if need be. The level of service is acceptable. That was another concern. We are in the central urban future land use category, and they also had a question about drainage. Because there was a lot of interest in this hearing, we were there for 2 days. That gave the engineer the opportunity to go back out again and be able to pictorially demonstrate what he testified to originally, and that is the mobile home park drainage does not interface with the drainage from this project. They discharge at different places in different basins. And so while I appreciate that they have some concerns about their drainage, this project will not have any impact on those issues. And we also had a landscape architect work with the engineer and the planner to address that interface and provide above and beyond buffers and protection, and did a lot of extensive line of sight to indicate that we wouldn't have an adverse impact. The hearing examiner did give us some chores at the end of the first hearing to go provide more information at the second hearing to address some of those questions. So we did that and addressed all the hearing examiner's concerns. So with that, we have the team ready to respond to questions, unless you'd like to hear the long PowerPoint now.
Commissioners, what's your pleasure? I think, we each read the HECS report, and we have a pretty good idea of the record. Thank you for your presentation. At this time, I'll go ahead and begin calling the participants of record. These are all in alphabetical order, so I'm just going to read down the list. If you're here, would you just raise your hand, and then we'll bring you up to the podium. The first name on the list is Dr. Sydney Adams. Dr. Sydney Adams. Okay. The next name on the list is Victoria Adams. Okay, Victoria, come on to the podium. And again, once you get up here, you don't need to touch the microphone. Everything's all set for you. And I'll show you when you get up here. I'll point out, you have 5 minutes to share your comments. There's a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. When the red light comes on, I'll call the next speaker, okay?
Okay, let me say this is the first time I've ever dealt with anything like this. I'm sure I've made mistakes in my presentation. While I appreciate her saying it doesn't impact us, it does impact us. And Florida DOT was kind enough to make some adjustments in their plan which will make it better. I understand that what we're saying about volume is you are taking an area that is single floor housing for miles, and you are putting in a 4-story 181 unit thing. It will be looming over us, and it is very close. And you can show me a tree and say, look, you'll only see the top of them. What are they going to see when they look down in our yards? I'm sorry, that takes away all our privacy, all our individual rights. They will be looming over us. The traffic, I understand, the whole area is terrible. And I agree with the woman who said, you know, let a little of this settle in and then see what we do to increase it. There are 3 huge projects very, very close to us on 41. Del Webb, how many units is that? I'm sure you all know. The one behind the racetrack, which is 4 huge 4-story buildings, but that is a couple miles up the road in a commercial area. We are basically residential. All the businesses are 1-story. Everything, the Winn-Dixie is the biggest thing. LCEC is down the road a little bit. It's set way back from 41. It's not looming over people the way this will be. This will be, they said to us, would you rather have a swimming pool next to you, a cage? Yes, we definitely would. This is going to be tall enough. Yes, they reduced it a little bit. What they're not saying is they raised it up because they have to put foundation in. So they reduced it from 60 to 52, but then they're raising it up again because they're putting stuff in the bottom. So the net, I think, was 3 or 4 feet. It's ridiculous for the area. That gentleman said, when he was asked, is it appropriate? It's not ideal. To say it's not ideal is probably politically correct for him at the hearing, but it's understating the problem. It is totally inappropriate to have something that tall. We understand that area will be developed, but to put the density up from where it was and then to add additional density units is inappropriate. It really is inappropriate. And the majority of the people who are not here because they're seasonal, they're up north, there were family emergencies. Everyone in the park, which is almost 400 units, is extremely upset about this and feels that it's totally inappropriate. Bare minimum, they're giving us buffer zones. You're going to have people in there that are going to be looking over our amenities, and they have minimal amenities. In the beginning, they had nothing. Now they have minimal. So they're going to be looking at what we've got, and there are going to be children in there. We are 55 plus. We chose to move to a 55 plus. There are going to be kids up there looking down saying, oh, they've got a nice big pool. They've got a lot of open space. We can go play there. We can do this or that. We can take those golf carts. We can borrow those bicycles. There's a huge concern about crime. There's a huge concern about the traffic. I understand that's not their problem. That's the county's problem, but that's you gentlemen. So I appreciate your time. It concerns me a little bit that I get these buzzers and the other side gets no buzzers. When we made our statements, then they get to refute us. We don't get to say anything back. And several of the comments were very demeaning towards us for complaining. We don't mean to stand in Lee County's way. We understand the county is growing. Some of us have moved down here. We're part of the county growing. But this is entirely inappropriate. So I hope you consider that.
Thanks for your comments this morning. Our next speaker then is Cheryl Buss. Cheryl Buss? She's not here. Okay, Shauna Kane? Good morning.
Good morning. I appreciate the time to talk. I didn't expect to have it. I appreciate everything that Vicki said. The only thing that I would add is this does not seem appropriate. That is a very small space. And my concerns are the turtles. I think they had a specialist come in and claim there was 15. I know that's not true. My backyard is right up against that. I, in my own yard, have 5 burrows. I believe there's many, many, many burrows in that area. Why are we going to take that away? we're just going to try to squeeze 180 units in. Let's keep some green space. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment this morning. The next person listed is Vicki L. Davis Adams. Vicki L. Davis Adams. Okay. Next one is Barbara DeBoer. Okay. How about Robert Edmonds? Robert Edmonds? Okay. How about Steve Foster? Steve Foster? How about Pam Griffin? Okay. Richard Hampton? Morgan Hess? Okay. Daniel Inabnit?
I am here. I have no comment. Everything that I was going to say is that so far.
Okay. Waives his time to comment then. Okay. How about Teresa Inabnit? Would you like to speak? Okay. Waives her time as well. Linda Jarrell? Linda, would you like to speak?
Okay, here we go. I live on the Bayshore side of this of our place, Village Carriage. They're going to take down, they said they're going to take down all the shrubbery, everything that's there, and plant a tree, plant a bush, plant a tree, plant a bush. Meanwhile, how long is it going to take for that to happen where everyone can now see my backyard? They can walk through it. We're only allowed to have a 4-foot fence on our property. 4 feet, anybody can jump that. And I'm concerned about that because I live right by the clubhouse. So people can come through my yard, go to the clubhouse, and go to the pool area and the shuffleboard area and anything else they want to do. We are exposed now, those people along Bayshore Road. And I am concerned with the other people on the other side. Right, our privacy now is gone. If they have that tall building, they can look down at us. Yes, they have buffers. But how long is it going to take for that buffer to actually be available to us? In the meantime, we probably, there's a lot of us that have been in the park for a long, long time. And they'll probably move because their privacy now is taken away from them. So it's going to destroy our property and our property value also. And so those are my concerns, and I thank you.
For your comment this morning. All right, Russell Lockman. Russell.
Good morning.
Morning.
I've only been in Carriage Village a little over 2 years now, but since this all came out, everything was basically put to us was false. It started out with a so-called drone survey with the tortoises. The height is that the biggest things are, like it was brought up before, you gotta keep some green space. Bayshore Drive, the traffic is absolutely atrocious. At our second meeting, they showed us a picture of Bayshore Drive. 3 vehicles in that picture. That was it. When was that picture taken? It wasn't, it's just crazy. And as far as for the environmental study, it was supposedly a drone survey. Okay, 15 tortoise mounds. I had pictures on my phone here, I still have them, just in my backyard and my next door neighbors on either side of me. That's 150 feet. I got over 60 photographs. I wanted to submit them at the second meeting. Well, they said we couldn't do it. It was on a Fire Stick. Oh, because it could screw up their computer system. Well, no. So we end up having to make individual photos and send them in. But the biggest thing besides the tortoises and that, it's safety. If they do what they want to do with that Bayshore Road, ambulances, fire trucks, they're not going to get in there because they're going to have to sit at that light at Hart because everybody here knows what the traffic is like. You can sit at a traffic light, here comes a fireman behind you, or an ambulance, or a cop, whatever. They can't get through at the lights. And they sit there. Meanwhile, you're in our village every single day, 365 days out of the year, there's at least one ambulance, one emergency vehicle of some kind coming in here. And you do this, put this compact, and all that traffic, forget it. It's nothing but a big death trap. That's it.
Thank you for your comments this morning. How about Betty Lamb? Betty Lamb, are you here? Oh, no, not here? Okay. How about Michael Latore, or Michael Latour? Not here. How about Tim then Latour? Okay. Frank Mendoza? Frank Mendoza? Okay. Dan Pence? Okay. Gary Peterson? Gary Peterson? Okay. Judith Peterson? I assume up north. Birdie Jane Rich? Birdie's up north. Angela Smith? Okay. John Tope? John Tope. And then Randall White. Okay. All right. Very good. So back to the applicant to go ahead and respond to the comments that were made.
Yes, we are. I'm going to call Alexis Crespo, who will start off the conversation, and Mr. King and Mr. Kelly will respond to the issues that you've heard.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Alexis Crespo. I was about to grab the mic, like you instructed us not to do. Alexis Crespo with RVI Planning and Landscape Architecture on behalf of the applicant. I'm gonna pull up a couple of slides to address some of those comments made and just discuss the changes we've made throughout the staff review and public hearing process. We certainly appreciate that infill development is a challenge for the existing surrounding residents, and we really worked diligently to modify our plan to address the concerns we heard. I just want to set a little bit of context. The site is shown in blue. It's well within your central urban future land use category. You can see the light pink is where the future land use transitions to intensive development along the Cleveland Avenue corridor. So this is well within the urbanized area of Lee County. This is where the Lee Plan and the Land Development Code want to direct new development. We know Lee County is growing rapidly and we're running out of land. And so these infill properties provide opportunities for, again, infill where there's existing infrastructure, services, employment, and opportunities to provide gaps in housing stock to allow an employment base and allow Lee County to continue to grow. This is an arterial corridor. Having single-family or low-density uses would not be appropriate based upon the provisions of the Lee Plan. Bayshore Corridor is very active. Development has certainly pushed into the northern portion of the county. As you can see by the slide, a lot of these planned developments that line the roadway were approved even pre-recession and are now coming to build out. The lady mentioned Del Webb at the interchange, a lot of master plan communities going up in that area. And then along the corridor, you can see State Road 78 is not entirely residential in character, but it's a mix of commercial plan developments, mixed-use plan developments, and we would submit that this multifamily project would again provide for a housing option not seen in the area and fit within the context of this roadway, which is really transitioning in character as Lee County continues to build out. I'll also note you can see the Caloosahatchee River in downtown. We're close to downtown. This could provide housing for folks that work in that area. Although we are close to the Caloosahatchee River, we are not within the coastal high hazard area. So again, this is the type of site where the policies and regulations of Lee County want to direct new growth. This is a busy map with a lot of colors on it. The hearing examiner likes for applicants to locate infrastructure services in proximity to the project. That is what this map is doing. You can see there's employment, hospitals, parks, transit, fire, schools, all within really a 3-mile radius and certainly within a 5-mile radius of the project to serve the proposed density. We are within a quarter mile of an existing 4-story building. So we do certainly respect that our neighbors are single-story and I'll walk you through a couple of our design standards to ensure compatibility with our neighbors. But in terms of the complexion of Bayshore Road, it's not all single-story uses. And the redevelopment is occurring. I've noted two projects which aren't about 2 miles of the site. Our office fortunately got to work on both of them, and those are 4-story apartment projects along US 41, again, to provide for the demand for alternative housing in this area at densities higher than is being requested on this site. The next slide is an illustrative version of our master concept plan. I hope what pops out to you is the green, the perimeter buffers. We pushed the buildings to the middle of the site, and we provided the most expansive buffers possible. We went with 30-foot type F buffers along the perimeters to the east and west. A lot of those utilize existing indigenous vegetation that are on the site. And then the northern portion you can see is where we have located the bulk of our indigenous preserve area as well as the stormwater management lake. So there are no buildings directly interfacing with our neighbors. As Shahram noted, we have a 60-foot minimum setback of the building. I would submit to you the buildings you can see on our design are actually greater in setback than that, but the zoning condition states 60 feet. And that is well in excess of your code requirements for setbacks of a building of this height, recognizing that it is different from our neighbors. We redesigned that access way. You can see that the proposed gated entry is set well within the property, if I can point to that with its arrow. That's to ensure we don't stack onto Bayshore Road, and as cars are queuing in, there's, I believe, about double the stacking that would typically be required to ensure safe traffic flow into the site. At the request of the hearing examiner and information we heard at the public hearing, there was concern about on-site recreational activities for the residents. We have located that amenity facility internal to the property, so it would be blocked by buildings to preclude noise impacts and other impacts of that use to our single-family neighbors. And I've walked through those items visually with you. I'm going to just wrap up with some lines of sight that we provided at our public hearings to demonstrate what our neighbors will see. So I'm starting over with the single-family homes up that front Shirley Lane. This line of sight is to scale. This demonstrates our 30-foot wide buffer with the required trees as well as shrub hedgerow and our perimeter berm, which will be required to keep our stormwater internal to the site. And those would be to scale people approximately 5'8" in height that are within the backyards of those units. And so you can see with our 60-foot setback, as well as the vegetation, when they look up there, and certainly when they look forward, their views will be of the vegetation, which has to go in when we prepare the site. So we cannot get a certificate of occupancy to have people live in this community prior to installing those landscape buffers to all the specifications of our zoning conditions. The next, most speakers were from Carriage Village, and so important to show scenarios from the east of our site looking westward from Carriage Village. You'll note in several cases along our property lines, there are accessory structures associated with Carriage Village that are encroaching into our property area. So they're built very, very close to our property line currently. We've been able to maintain a lot of the taller native vegetation within this property line. So the dark tree is representing specimens that will remain on site. We'll work around when we do our clearing and grading. And then the green shows the proposed plantings that we will install to supplement those existing trees. And again, the vegetation will block views based upon the significant setback of the building, as well as those plantings. Lastly, I'll leave you with the RS1 zoning. I, again, would submit that as underutilization of this site. It's on an arterial corridor. This is not where you'd necessarily locate that type of low-density use based on the future land use categories, the development pattern in the area. If single-family homes were built to to the height allowed by the code. They're actually allowed to go to 35 feet, and at a setback allowed by the code. The development would confront the neighbors much more significantly than our proposed scenario with significant buffers and preserve along the property line. Under RS1, we wouldn't have to do any indigenous preserve within the property. We wouldn't be triggering buffering standards, so there could be no buffer, and the building's very close to the existing homes on either side of the property, and we would submit our proposed design will again be more consistent with what the Lee plan wants to see on this site, and also be a better result long-term for the neighbors in terms of the sensitivity we've built into the project. With that, I'll ask Neil to tell us who's next, unless you have questions.
Any questions for the planner? No?
Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, Tim Keene, civil engineer for this project. Let's see. There we go. So one of the questions that was brought up about, that Neil had mentioned, was about drainage. We studied the drainage pretty intensively. One of the unusual features about this property, and it kind of speaks to the vintage of the land around it, everything is very flat. This piece of property is not low. It's not receiving water from the adjacent properties. It's very, very low. I mean, very, very flat across everything, which is kind of unusual, but again, it's about the age of the surrounding developments. Carriage Village has some drainage facilities at their perimeter. You can see at the top of the plan, they actually have some collection pipes that take this over to Dodgers Creek or Powell Creek bypass. At the bottom, they actually have some concrete flumes that take it around the property down to their entrance and into the FDOT right-of-way. Our only drainage outfall is going to be to the south and into the FDOT right-of-way. So this have to get drainage permits from both the Water Management District and the FDOT, Florida Department of Transportation. On the panhandle, the skinny piece along 41 along Bayshore Road, that's kind of a remnant piece for when Bayshore Road was wide. And Bayshore Road, Mr. Greenwell, you know, you probably here for a long time. Bayshore Road used to be a two-lane road. It was a little bit further south, and so that little skinny piece, piece became skinny when Bayshore was widened. This slide kind of shows that to the left is looking along the north side of that little panhandle piece. It's all exotic vegetation. One of the speakers mentioned about, I think she lives in one of the homes here to the right, and you know, we'll have to take out all that exotic vegetation. So what we propose is this is one of our indigenous restoration areas so that we can basically replace over time, sorry it won't be immediately, but we can replace over time that buffer that they currently enjoy. There's really no other practical use. We're not going to go in and change the grade. We're not going to use it for detention area. There's no really super benefit to the project for doing that. You can see this little drainage concrete swale that's part of their historic drainage problems. They actually they've done some self-help and put in some pumps to kind of address their own drainage situation, unrelated to this piece of property, which, and I feel badly for them, but we're trying very hard not to cause any additional harm to them. Property goes into a flood zone now. The line of sight studies that Alexis presented takes this into consideration. If you saw in there, we actually raised the buildings 3 feet. Before we had them at 2 feet. Since we first applied, the new maps came into effect, so we raised it up another foot to reflect what I expect would happen with the development for the drainage design. A concern had been brought up about fire access. This is just a little study we did showing how a ladder truck can traverse the property. All the buildings, multifamily buildings, would be fire sprinklered. There's water main in the right-of-way. I don't need to go too detailed. This was an example of how we've got a deep entrance. It gives us a lot of stacking. You can see it's kind of really wide in the middle. There's a requirement that we be able to turn a furniture truck around at the entrance outside the gates. We can accommodate that. with this design. I don't know. All right, I'm going to get the master concept plan. The location of the drive, we have a deviation that is in relation to the location of our entrance. Our entrance, there's no median out here. We have a 5-lane road with a bidirectional turn lane, suicide lane, and we have to locate our driveway where it's at because it aligns with the roadway on the south. The FDOT project, and Ted's not here today, so I'll work on this. So the FDOT is coming in here to add a median between Hart and Old Bridge, between those two traffic lights. That's one of the only segments currently that has a 5-lane cross-section and a bidirectional turn lane. This is what's really unfortunate for Village. Right now, headed eastbound, you could make a left turn directly into their entrance. All their traffic is going to be forced to make a U-turn at Hart Road. Again, unrelated to this project. We will have the ability, once this is done, we will actually have the ability to work with FDOT and possibly get a eastbound directional left into our project. It'll meet all the criteria. We may have to do some work in the right-of-way. We may have that. There's currently a southbound directional left. We may have to move that up a street, basically where our entrance is currently shown on our MCP. At that point, our entrance can shift. Our entrance can shift west, and we can get our entrance further away from the neighboring property. We are proposing a wall at that point, and we do have a buffer deviation. And the HECS basically recommended that if we're able to move our driveway west in that deviation, we're not entitled to that deviation, which we agree with. This is just a little close-up to that. Kind of shows you a little better what FDOT is planning. This is just a table out of the FDOT spacing requirements, the 660. This is where we would be able to, you can see it's in the directional column. We would be able to get a directional left northbound working with FDOT.
Yeah, let me help you. There's a memo, I think, from the staff on the level of service on Bay Shore. Is level of service D with the project, which is an acceptable level of service? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I'm sorry that Ted's not here to give that.
Okay. Do you need anything else on the traffic?
Commissioners, yeah, any further questions for the applicant at this time then? Have they responded to everything that you were looking to hear, or any questions at all that you want to ask? Okay. The only thing that I would love to, just for the discussion part of this, is if we can go back to just that future land use map that showed the central urban category. Okay, so the property that your client bought the property in the blue there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I guess before we jump into consideration of the item, any further questions for Neil? I think that answers all my questions then.
Okay.
For you all. So the way this process, I understand, I hear a lot of what was said today. This is in my district, and certainly one that I feel very, very close to. I hear the comment a lot when I'm out in the community, we've got to preserve green space, right? You've got to keep some green space around here. And I have often felt that way myself. I was born and raised here. I've seen a lot of new stuff go up in the 40, I guess it's going to be 43 years now that I've been on this earth. And these reading glasses are now coming in handy more. So I understand it. I understand how people feel. I felt that way myself. When I became a county commissioner, one of the things I found out was that this is not a yes or no process. I think this process, unfortunately, gives the public the opinion that commissioners can just say no to a development. But there's a whole lot that goes into it that actually ties our hands that we're not able to say no. So one of your primary constitutional rights in America is that you have the right to own property. And then if the government is going to take that property, and one way the government could take that property is by regulating away your use of the property, then you deserve due process, meaning you deserve a hearing. And so that's why we're here today. We get a hearing now to understand how the government is going to condition your use of your property. And so even though we look at it and we see, well, it's green, it's not owned by the county, and the county has no real right to force it to stay green unless they buy it. And we've done that in Lee County. We've actually bought other properties for Conservation 2020. That's why we have amazing preserves that you kind of see on the edge of the map here. But one thing that our predecessors have done and that is considered a good planning practice, now I think it's become a very controversial practice, but is they set up the future land use map to direct growth in the future. And they set up areas of the county that they think should have intense growth, and they set up areas of the county that they think should be more rural. And if you'll see, the blue dot that we're talking about here is right in the dead center, well, not maybe dead center, but it's right in the middle of what's being called the central urban category. So now, as commissioners and decision makers, we're in a position where we've got a property owner who purchased property in the central urban category who is now coming to apply to use his land use rights in the central urban category. And so we can't deny him that unless we have competent, substantial evidence to deny him that. And so that's why we hold the hearing. We have an amazing team of staff that review all of this and apply all the land development codes. We have the hearing examiner who takes all the testimony and evidence, and then they bring us that recommendation, and then that's where we are at. We can condition things to try and make them more compatible, and I think there's been a pretty good explanation of how things have been conditioned here. But at the end of the day, I understand how people feel, but it's not one of those things where you can just say no without legal consequences. And Lee County has had that in the past. We've denied zonings in the past where basically they go across the street to a real courtroom, and then the real judge rules in favor of the law, the constitutional property rights, and then the county faces $1 million penalty. So then the property owner gets the multiple $1 million, plus they get to build. So it's not a good thing for the entire public of Lee County. So that's where we're at today. That's how the process works. I try to explain that because I know for a lot of people this may be your first time here at a commission meeting today. We do this every day, and I think sometimes it's not fair for us to just assume that everybody knows what we're doing. So sorry for the long explanation, but commissioners, it's the time for the board to consider the item, and certainly I would entertain a motion or consideration or discussion at this time.
I'd like a comment, Chairman, if I may as well. I appreciate you explaining that because our hands are really tied in these situations, and that's the use of the property, and I have no legal right to say no as a commissioner, so I will move the item forward.
Okay, we have a motion for approval from Commissioner Greenwell. Do we have a second? Second from Commissioner Ruane. Do we have further discussion on the item, commissioners? Commissioner Sandelli.
I just have one question. Where we do have some discretion is whether we allow the bonus density, correct?
Okay, yep.
Okay. And if we approve this without the bonus density, how would that change the elevation as one issue in this of the property?
I think that's a good question for the staff to answer, or perhaps they could defer to the
Good.
So the question was about the bonus density.
We have the discretion, is my understanding.
You have discretion to approve or deny the bonus density. You have the discretion to approve or deny the bonus density. A bonus density is not given. So you may approve it with 89 units.
I understand we can approve
the
it.
base density, but not approve the bonus density if you choose so.
It's going to be the applicant that would have to adjust to determine if their design would have to be changed, whether or not the bonus density is approved. So I think if you want to have the applicant address that, that might be more appropriate if the height would change if bonus density was not approved.
Okay, so applicant, go ahead and address Commissioner Sandelli's question, please.
It's simply a question.
Yeah.
Because we
I'll turn it over to Alexis. I would say on page 4 of the hearing examiner's report, she identifies the criteria and indicates that we meet the criteria.
Yeah, thank you. Again, Alexis Crespo, for the record. Yeah, in terms of, I'll just hit on them briefly. There are 4 criteria that the board uses to evaluate if bonus density is appropriate on a property. Are we routing traffic through a residential neighborhood or a lower density neighborhood? Our access is directly onto Bay Shore and arterial roadway. Are there public facilities available to serve the density? We've gotten our letters of availability from all required service providers, as well as roadway level of service to prove that test. 3 is, are you providing storm shelter mitigation if we're putting bonus density in coastal high hazard? Fortunately, that is not an issue. This site is not within coastal high hazard. Again, this is an ideal site for the bonus density compared to other properties that would be in that designation. And then 4 is really the catch-all of, are we compatible, and submit to you based upon the buffer enhancements, the setback enhancements, that we have met that test per, and staff and HEX are in agreement with that. In terms of your actual question, we did not design a regular density use of the site. Multifamily, there is a critical mass of units required to make a multifamily project work. And really the sweet spot is 180 is at the very low end of that. Typically you're seeing these projects be more like 200 to 300 units. Obviously the site wouldn't support that many, but the bonus density is critical to achieving the multifamily concept for the site. Thank you.
All right, Commissioners.
Yeah, I would just want to add one more thing. I mean, I know that the chairman has spent a lot of time to try to create a larger, better, updated commercial corridor in North Fort Myers. One of the things that you need for that is year-round residents, and we need people who work in that area to be able to live in that area. We're constantly hearing about the need for workforce housing. This is an ideal location on a major arterial, so I'd ask you to keep that in mind.
Thank you very much. All right, Commissioners, so we have a motion on the floor for approval from Commissioner Greenwell, second from Commissioner Ruane. Any further discussion on the motion at this time? Okay, I see no further discussion on their motion. Are there any objections to the motion? No. Okay, I see no objections. That motion carries unanimously. And seeing that there's no further business before us, we are adjourned. Thanks.